My girlfriend said, "Don't you dare message him," when I wanted to confront her ex about their ongoing contact. I said, "You're right, that's not my place." Then I sent him something that made her cry for days. I, 32M, discovered something that shattered my 3-year relationship and led me down a path I never thought I'd take. What started as a simple request to my girlfriend turned into the most calculated revenge I've ever executed. It began on a Tuesday evening when I was helping my girlfriend move some boxes from her car. Her phone kept buzzing with notifications, and each time it did, she'd quickly grab it and turn it face down. The third time this happened, I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen, her ex-boyfriend from college. The same ex she'd assured me was completely out of her life. That night, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my stomach. We'd been living together for 8 months, and I thought we were solid. She'd always been transparent about everything, or so I believed. When I finally worked up the courage to ask her about the messages, her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She became defensive immediately, claiming it was just casual conversation between old friends. When I pressed further, asking what they could possibly have to talk about so frequently, she snapped at me. She accused me of being controlling and paranoid, then stormed into the bedroom and slammed the door. The next few days were tense. Every time her phone buzzed, I noticed how quickly she'd check it, how she'd smile slightly while typing responses, and how she'd immediately delete the conversation threads. The secrecy was eating me alive, but whenever I brought it up, she'd turn it around on me, making me feel like the unreasonable one. A week later, I finally decided I'd had enough. I told her I wanted to message her ex directly, just to clear the air and understand what was going on between them. Her reaction was explosive. She grabbed my arm and looked me dead in the eyes, forbidding me from contacting him under any circumstances. She insisted it would ruin everything and that I needed to trust her. I agreed, telling her she was right and that it wasn't my place to interfere in their friendship. She seemed relieved, kissing me and promising we'd work through this together. But that night, as she slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake planning something entirely different. The next morning, after she left for work, I did something that would change everything. Instead of messaging her ex directly, I created a fake social media account using a generic female name and an attractive profile picture I found online. I spent hours crafting the perfect persona, someone who would appeal to exactly the type of guy her ex appeared to be based on his public posts. It took 3 days of careful interaction before he took the bait. I started by liking his photos and leaving subtle comments that showed interest. He responded positively, and soon we were having private conversations. I played the role perfectly, flirty but not desperate, interested but not overly available. During our conversations, I steered the discussion toward relationships. He mentioned having feelings for someone who was currently in a relationship, someone he'd been talking to regularly despite knowing it was complicated. He bragged about how she still had feelings for him and how he was confident he could win her back if he played his cards right. But the real revelation came when he started sharing screenshots of their conversations. My blood ran cold as I recognized my girlfriend's messages immediately. The conversations were far more intimate than I'd imagined. They weren't just catching up as old friends. They were actively planning to meet up when she was supposed to be visiting her sister next weekend. The messages revealed months of emotional cheating. She'd been complaining about our relationship to him, sharing intimate details about our problems, and seeking comfort from someone who clearly wanted her back. Worse yet, she'd been lying to me about multiple things: the business trips that ran late, the girls' nights that seemed to happen more frequently, even the story about her sister needing help. I screenshot everything, making sure to capture the timestamps and the clearly identifiable profile pictures. Then I continued playing my role, getting him to admit even more. He confessed to feeling guilty about pursuing someone in a relationship, but justified it by saying she was obviously unhappy and deserved better. He even mentioned specific things about our apartment that she'd obviously described to him in detail. The final piece of evidence came when he shared his excitement about their planned weekend together. He'd already booked a hotel room and was confident this would be the weekend she'd finally leave me for him. He described their entire plan: how she'd tell me she was visiting her sister, how they'd spend the weekend reconnecting, and how she'd break up with me when she returned. I had everything I needed, but I wasn't done yet. I spent the next 2 days gathering additional evidence, going through her social media more carefully, checking our shared calendar against the timeline of their conversations, and even finding receipts that contradicted some of her stories about where she'd been. Friday evening arrived, and she began preparing for her supposed trip to visit her sister. She packed her nicest clothes, spent extra time on her makeup, and seemed more excited than I'd seen her in months. As she kissed me goodbye, promising to call me every night, I felt a mix of disgust and anticipation for what was coming next. I waited until Saturday morning, letting her get settled into what she thought was her perfect deception. Then I executed my plan. I sent her ex everything. Every screenshot of our fake conversations, every admission he'd made about their relationship, and most importantly, proof that he'd been played by a fake account the entire time. I included a message explaining exactly who I was and what I discovered. I told him I knew about their weekend plans, about the months of lies, and about his role in destroying my relationship. But the real knife twist came at the end. I thanked him for making it so easy to gather evidence, and told him I'd be forwarding everything to my girlfriend shortly. Within an hour, her phone started ringing. I could see his name flashing on the screen from across the room, but she was busy posting photos of her fake sister visit to social media. When she finally answered, I watched her face transform from confusion to horror as he frantically tried to explain what had happened. She hung up and immediately called me, her voice shaking as she asked what I'd done. I told her calmly that I'd kept my promise. I hadn't messaged her ex at all. Instead, I'd let him do all the talking for me. Then I sent her every single screenshot, every piece of evidence, and every detail of their planned betrayal. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted almost a minute. When she finally spoke, she was crying, begging me to let her explain, insisting things weren't what they seemed. I cut her off, telling her she had until Sunday evening to collect her belongings from our apartment, and that I'd be staying elsewhere until she was gone. But I wasn't finished yet. The next phase of my revenge was just beginning. Update 1. Sunday came and went, and she didn't show up to collect her things. Instead, she bombarded me with texts, calls, and voicemails, alternating between apologies and accusations. She claimed I'd violated her privacy, that what I'd done was manipulative and wrong, and that her ex had somehow manipulated both of us. I ignored most of her attempts to contact me, but I did listen to the voicemails. In them, she tried every possible angle, claiming she never actually cheated, insisting her conversations with her ex were taken out of context, and even suggesting that I was the one with trust issues who had driven her away. The mental gymnastics were impressive, but I'd expected nothing less. What I hadn't expected was her next move. She enlisted her best friend to contact me, claiming I was being cruel and unreasonable. According to her friend, my girlfriend was devastated and couldn't understand why I was being so vindictive over what amounted to innocent conversations with an old friend. This gave me the perfect opportunity for the next phase of my plan. I forwarded all the evidence to her best friend, including the hotel reservation her ex had made and the explicit discussions about their physical relationship plans. Her friend called me back within an hour, apologizing profusely and admitting she'd had no idea about the extent of the deception. But the real satisfaction came when her friend revealed something else. My girlfriend had been lying to her too. She'd been canceling plans with her female friends to spend time talking to her ex, and she'd even asked her friend to cover for her on several occasions when she needed alibis for suspicious activities. By Monday, word had spread through their entire friend group. My girlfriend found herself not only without a relationship, but also without the support system she'd been counting on to help her through the breakup. Her friends were disgusted by the lies and manipulation, and several of them reached out to me to apologize for not seeing the signs earlier. Meanwhile, her ex had completely cut contact with her after realizing how thoroughly he'd been exposed. The weekend they'd planned together never happened, and according to mutual acquaintances, he was humiliated by how easily he'd been manipulated into revealing everything. Update 2. 2 weeks later, she finally came to collect her belongings, but not alone. She brought her father with her, probably hoping his presence would guilt me into a conversation or reconciliation. I remained polite but distant, helping load boxes into their car without engaging in any meaningful dialogue. Her father, however, wanted to talk. He pulled me aside while she was gathering items from the bedroom and asked what had really happened between us. I could see the genuine confusion in his eyes. She'd obviously given him a very different version of events. I showed him everything. Every screenshot, every lie, every piece of evidence I'd gathered. I watched his face change as he realized the extent of his daughter's deception. When he asked why I'd gone to such elaborate lengths to expose her, I explained that it wasn't just about the cheating. It was about the months of gaslighting, the way she'd made me question my own sanity, and the systematic way she'd been planning to destroy our relationship while keeping me as a backup plan. He was quiet for a long time after that. When she came back downstairs with the last of her boxes, he looked at her differently. The drive home must have been uncomfortable, because she called me that evening, sobbing and admitting that her father was disappointed in her choices. But the consequences were still unfolding. Her workplace had a strict policy about personal conduct, and when her colleagues learned about the situation through social media posts and mutual connections, it created an uncomfortable environment for her. She'd often talked about her perfect relationship at work, and the dramatic revelation of her deception had become office gossip. More importantly, her ex had decided to share his own version of events with their mutual college friends, painting her as manipulative and deceitful. The reputation she'd carefully crafted over the years was crumbling as more people learned the truth about her character. Update 3. A month later, she made one final attempt at reconciliation. She showed up at my apartment unannounced, claiming she'd learned from her mistakes and wanted to rebuild our relationship. She'd cut all contact with her ex, she said, and was willing to do whatever it took to earn back my trust. I listened to her entire speech without interrupting. She talked about how the past month had been the worst of her life, how she'd realized what she'd lost, and how she was committed to being completely honest going forward. She even offered to give me complete access to her phone and social media accounts. When she finished, I asked her one simple question. When exactly did she plan to tell me the truth if I hadn't discovered it myself? She couldn't answer. We both knew that she would have gone through with her weekend plans, likely would have continued the emotional affair indefinitely, and might eventually have left me for him without ever explaining why. I told her the relationship was over permanently, not just because of what she'd done, but because of who she'd revealed herself to be. The elaborate deception, the gaslighting, the calculated manipulation, these weren't mistakes or momentary lapses in judgment. They were fundamental character flaws that couldn't be fixed with promises and apologies. She left crying, and I never saw her again. 6 months later, I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to another city, supposedly for a fresh start. Her ex had apparently started dating someone else almost immediately after our confrontation, which devastated her more than losing me had. The irony wasn't lost on me. She destroyed a stable, loving relationship for someone who saw her as nothing more than a convenient distraction. As for me, I learned valuable lessons about trust, deception, and the importance of decisive action when someone shows you who they really are. The revenge had been satisfying, but more importantly, it had given me complete closure and the confidence to move forward without any lingering doubts or what-ifs. Looking back, I don't regret my methods. She'd spent months systematically destroying our relationship while making me feel crazy for suspecting anything was wrong. The elaborate nature of my response matched the elaborate nature of her deception, and the public consequences she faced were simply the natural result of her choices becoming known. Sometimes the most effective revenge isn't violence or cruelty. It's simply ensuring that someone's actions have their natural consequences, without the protection of secrecy and lies.